The purpose of this lesson is to teach you an introduction to what is called responsive web design. For this lesson, what I have done is I created a copy of index.html and I called it responsive.html. I added a link to both of those files to responsive.html, which is going to be my responsive design. And what you will notice is that for this lesson, I am going to be using Firefox. The reason that I want to use Firefox is we are going to start learning some of the developer tools that are available to us that will make troubleshooting our website a little bit easier. I have also added a little bit of content to this page, and what I did is just simply created an image, which is in the images folder. It's a file called tree.jpg. It has an ID of tree, and it has an alt tag of tree in the field, and it has a width and height. I also added four paragraphs of text so that you can see what will happen with our document when we start making it more responsive. So this is our basic layout. I have the header, I have the nav section with all of my links in it, I have the tree, and then I also have all of my text at the bottom. So what I'm going to try to do is make the site that it will become more responsive when I start changing the size of the screen. To make the site a little more responsive, what I want to do is I want to start playing with my styles. And up until this point, I've created a file called style.css that I just simply stuck in the root of the folder, and I let all of my sites look at that file. Well, I don't necessarily want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder, and I will call it styles. And notice when you go through these, notice everything is lowercase except for my dummy text file. This is what you should see when you go through the list. Your folder should be lowercase, the file should be lowercase, everything should be lowercase, because in a Linux system, case matters. Windows is forgiving, but if you're using a Linux hosting service, which would be cheaper, then your casing will definitely matter. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file inside of here. And I'm not going to call it styles, I'm going to call it all. And I will show you why here in just a few minutes. So it's going to be called all.css, get rid of the .txt, and yes, I want to change the extension. Alright, so what this is going to do is I'm going to make it where all of my styles are going to go into this one file, and then I'm going to do some things to allow me to override certain types of styles depending on what kind of display the person is using. So I'm going to open this up with Notepad++, and I want to style my page just like we've done through the rest of the semester. So I want to format my body so that it has the font family being Arial or sans serif if I don't have Arial installed. I can do things like background color. And I want to make it almost white. We're going to make it like a grayish color. And so all I'm doing is just simply providing a little bit of a style to this. Now if I come over here and refresh, you'll notice nothing happened because I did not add my link yet. Alright, so to add my link, I'm going to come up here into the head. I'm going to link. Its relation is that it is a style sheet. And its hypertext reference is going to be styles/all.css. Okay, now I'm going to add one more piece to the end of this, which is an attribute called media. And what this is going to be is I'm going to tell it that for all of the different platforms I want it to use this. Now I can play with things like handheld, I can play with things with a different size screen, I can play with how it will format when it gets printed. I can play with it if it doesn't support CSS. We can ignore it. So we're going to go ahead and link that file, and now when I come over here and refresh, now I get that gray color and everything is Arial or sans serif. One of the basic requirements for doing responsive web design is that I am not going to use any inline styles. I don't want an inline style unless I absolutely have to have it. So what I'm going to do is all of my styles are going to be declared in the external style sheets. I don't even really want embedded styles if I can help it. Because what I want to do is I want the system to automatically figure out which of those sheets that it needs and automatically format based on the size of the screen that the user is using. The first type of media that I want to play with, besides just doing the font size and the background color, is I want to play with, when we print this out, what will happen to it. So it's going to be another link, and this time it's going to be a style sheet also. And its hypertext reference is going to be styles/print.css, and its media will be when we print it, so it's going to be print like this. Alright, so what I need to do is I need to create a new style sheet called print.css. Okay, so now here's my new style sheet, and the way that this will work is the browser will automatically pick out of these links what it needs depending on what is actually happening. So the intention here is that if I print it, it will use this style sheet. If I'm on a handheld, we would also create one here. We can use media equals handheld, although I'm going to show you that it doesn't work very well. I will show you ways around that. But what we want to pay attention to is what the browser is going to do with it. Okay, so what I want to do, when I print something out, I don't want the background color to be gray because I don't want to try to print a gray color out on somebody's printer. They're going to get upset with me if I print that much color. So what I'm going to do is I want to override that. And the way that I override it is by creating its own body section here. And we'll set the background color to white. Alright, so now if I go ahead and save that, come over here and refresh, you will notice that the page does not look any different. To see the change, I actually have to print it. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go to print. And here what you will see is the background color is now white. Okay, so the next question is, these links that are here, do I really need to print those out? And here's where the beauty of the different style sheets comes in, is that we can turn those off. I don't need those if it's being printed out. So we are going to go ahead and go back and turn that off. Alright, so I'm going to come back over here to print, and if you notice, all of my links are in this nav section up here. And so what I can do is I can tell it that I don't necessarily want those to show up. So what I am going to do is I'm going to set my nav, not navy, such that the display is set to none. So what this will do is make it where that nav section will not be displayed. Okay, so if I come over here and go to print, you'll notice nothing happened. We still see the links. And the reason for it is I did not refresh the page. I have to refresh the page to get these new changes. Okay, so now I go to print, and there we go. Now we don't have the links. So what we've just done is we've now saved this person from printing out all of those links that don't necessarily need to be there. Alright, so what I am doing is I created 4 different CSS files. I have one called all, I have one for mobile, I have print and screen. And what I am doing with these is I want them to be that no matter what platform somebody is on, that it is going to pull in this all.css. And if somebody is accessing it from a mobile device, it should use this file. If they're printing it, it should use this file. And if they're viewing it on a screen, such as a laptop or a desktop or something of that nature, then it should display screen. So what happens is I expect that if this person here with mobile.css, that they're coming in and looking at it from a handheld, then what I expect to happen would be to use the standard. And the standard says to do something like this. Link relation equals style sheet. Its hypertext reference is styles, and then mobile.css, and its media is equal to handheld. Now that is what the standard says. I'm going to show you in a minute that it doesn't work. So the next one is link as relation is going to be style sheet. Its preference is styles, and then screen.css. Its media is going to be the screen. And there we go. They're all my 4 CSS styles for responsive design. Like I said, this handheld one is not necessarily going to work. So I'll show you that it doesn't work, and then I will show you how to actually use it. For the purpose of this lesson, I am going to assume that these are my 4 style sheets, and that's all we're going to use. In reality, we would end up with a lot more than this, because what we're going to do is we're going to make it where if they have a very small device like a smartwatch, it will get one specific style sheet. If they have a device that is a small phone, let's say like an iPhone 4, then they would get another style sheet. If they have a larger phone like an iPhone 6 Plus, then they'd get another style sheet. If they have an iPad, let's say an iPad mini, they'll get another style sheet. If they get an iPad Air or a regular iPad, it'd be a little bit bigger, they get another style sheet. If you go into things like a laptop, you would get another style sheet. If you have a computer with a big screen on it, you'd have another style sheet, and so forth. So you can see how you can quickly add up on these. But for the purpose of this lesson, I just want to show you the basics of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use these 4. I will explain how these 4 work, and then I will show you, or I will describe to you on how you would actually make them a little bit different for other types of media. Alright, so I want to start by making my typical 2-column layout. I want to have my links on the left side, and I want the tree and everything else to be on the right side, and I want the tree to be floated to the right. So I'm going to do this under all because I would like for all of my platforms to be able to do this. Now I know that they're not all going to be able to, so we'll override this with specific platforms. Alright, so the first thing is our unordered list does not look very good. So we want to fix that. And so in the nav area, if we have a UL, do this. And what are we going to do with that UL? We're going to turn the list style type off. And what happens is now when I turn this off, watch what happens where the bullet is right now. I refresh the page, the bullet goes away, but notice the links didn't go over. So what I want to do is I want to adjust the padding on the left side. And what I want it to do is I don't want it to inherit the padding from the unordered list style. I want it to inherit it from the parent, which the parent is actually going to be the body. So I'm going to set this to inherit. And when I do this, watch the links over here. They will get sucked over to the edge because now they inherit the padding from the parent container object, which is the body. It's actually going to be the content, the nav div. So what we're going to do is we want to set these so that they don't have the underlines. I want to make them look nicer. I'm still going to do that in here. So in the nav section, if I have a list item that also happens to be an anchor, then I'm going to change its color to black. And I want to turn off that underline. So text decoration is none. Okay, and I want the text decoration if I hover it. So if I'm in the nav area and I have an LI that also happens to be an anchor that is being hovered, then I want to turn the text decoration back on. Okay, so now if I come over here, refresh page, they're black, I hover, I get the underline. This should be familiar because we've played with this throughout the semester and other CSS pages. But all we're doing is just simply trying to style our links to make them look a little bit nicer. I want to style these links just a little bit more, and so what I'm going to do is I've styled the anchors, but I haven't styled the actual list item itself. So what I'm going to do is in my nav section for the LIs, we're going to do this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify a width, and my width is going to be 200 pixels, and I want to put a border around it that is 1 pixel, and we're going to make it a solid, like a medium gray, so all 9s. And then when I save, refresh the page over here, you'll see I now get some boxes. Okay, so 200 pixels is a little wide, so let's do something like 180. There we go, it looks a little bit better. Okay, so now what I can do is I can put my content at 200 pixels over and move everything to the right. Alright, so what I'm going to do also is I want to align the text to the center. So we can do something like text align center. And I also want to create a little bit of padding inside of there just to make it look a little bit better. And so now we have something like this. So now we have things that look like buttons, and we hover over them, we get the underline. Now what I could do if I want to make this look more like a button is I could actually do things like a border radius. I could make it look really pretty, make it look like it's beveled. You know, we can even do something like, we'll just put a background color in here so you can make out that a little bit different. Okay, so I'm using a color picker. I have C6, D4, F5. Give me a little bit of a blue color. And there we go. So now I just simply made it where these are my links. They're in their own little section. I've given each one a color, and it just makes it look a little bit better. It gives what are called visual cues. Now, one of the things that you're going to be doing is you're going to have users that will actually go through and test out your site for you, hopefully, and they will do what's called usability testing. And during the usability testing process, they're going to try out the site and see if they can figure out how it works. And your job is to sit and watch them, see what they're doing, and see if they could figure it out and how you could make it a better experience for them. Alright, so I want to start building my two-column layout, and to do that I'm going to take the nav section and I'm going to float it to the right. I'm sorry, float it to the left. And I'm going to give it a width of about 200 pixels. Alright, so when I save the page and refresh over here, you'll see that I now have my nav on the left side. My content is on the right, but it is wrapping around my nav, and I don't necessarily want that to happen. So to fix the content wrapping, I'm going to create a new content section here. And I'm going to set my margin on the left side to be 200 pixels. When I refresh, now I get something like this. Okay, now my footer looks kind of funny like this, so we're going to take the footer and we are going to text align it center, and we'll change its font size to something like 0.80M, which remember makes that 80% of its original size. And there we go. So now I have something that's starting to look more like a two-column layout, what we're used to seeing for having our links on the left-hand side and then have our elements on the right-hand side. Alright, so this two-column layout view looks kind of nice. But what I want to show to you is that if I try to look at this on a mobile phone, that it will not necessarily look correct because I have stuff that is going to go off the side of the phone. I told you that the reason that I'm using Firefox is because I want to play with what are called developer tools, which is under the menu, go to developer, and I want to toggle the tools here. And what you will notice is on this bar here we have this one element here called responsive design mode. And when I click on this, it will actually show to me what the website looks like in a device that's 320 pixels wide by 480 pixels tall. Now, what I expect to happen is I expect for the browser to automatically realize that, oh, hey, this is a mobile phone, and show us this handheld style sheet. But in reality, what happens is it will ignore this because our our phones don't necessarily report that they're handhelds anymore. Now what they report is their size. So we'll get back to that in just a minute. But what I want you to see is that on my phone here, I have stuff that has gone off the side, and I actually can't get to the stuff that's over here. I don't see the picture. So what I want to do is I want to start designing this thing so that when I look at it on a phone, it looks right. I want the links to be in another spot. I don't want them to be on the left side here. I want them to be up above and so forth. Also, on a mobile phone, I don't necessarily want to show my graphic because it is going to tie up data. So if a graphic does not absolutely have to be there and the graphic will not add to the user experience, we should get rid of it on a mobile phone. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to tell the browser that if this thing's a mobile phone, use that screen, the mobile.css style sheet. And like I said, handheld doesn't work anymore because our phones don't necessarily report that they're handhelds anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it that if it is a screen and is less than a specific width, then we're going to show a specific style sheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say only if it's on a screen and then in parentheses, if the maximum width of the screen is about 480 pixels. And this is about the width of a standard iPhone. And so what happens is we'll realize that if the screen width is bigger than 380, then it won't show this one. But if it's less than 480, then it will use this style sheet. Okay, so if I save this and come over here and refresh, it doesn't look any different because I have not actually done anything with that style sheet yet. Alright, so let's play with the style sheet a little bit. Alright, what I want to do is I want to turn off this picture. Now the picture is called tree. I gave it an ID of tree. So what I can do is I can take tree and set its display to none. Come over here and refresh, and now it goes away. Now that's only if the width is less than 480. So I'm going to set my width bigger. So I'm going to say 768. And what you'll notice is the tree now comes back. The tree will only go away if the size of the screen is less than that maximum width of 480. Now I want to override some things, and what I mean by that is when I come over here to my original responsive.html file, I need to pay attention to the order that these style sheets actually get imported. And what happens is my browser will look at them one at a time and will apply them in the order that they're listed. Okay, so the order that I want to put them is going to be all of my screens, or all of my media. Then the next one that I'm going to put is going to be, if it is a regular screen, display this. And then if they're printing it, do this, and mobile is going to be last. Because what will happen is it will go through, it'll look at the nav section and format the nav section based on this value right here. It's floated to the left. Then it comes through and says, okay, is it a screen? Yes. And then if it's a screen, it'll look at the screen.css file, and it will apply whatever attributes are to the nav section. Then it'll look and see, are we printing it? No. Are we on a mobile? Yeah, we're on a mobile because we are a screen and the width is less than 480. So what I want to do is I want to override my float for the nav section. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to override it based on the order that they get applied here and the size of the screen. So I'm going to come here to mobile.css, and I'm going to add, for the nav section, what I want to do is I want to turn the float off. Okay, now what happens is when I come over here and refresh, now the float is turned off. But the thing is that my content down here at the bottom is still margin left is set to 200 pixels. So it's still shoved over, even though this isn't floating. Alright, so what I want to do though is on a phone, I want these to be the full width of the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the attribute that I had set before, because I said before the width was 200 pixels. I want to override that, so I'm going to say that the width is back to inheriting the width of the screen. And so now when I come and refresh, now they're the full width. Now for this to work though, one thing that I had to change is that we had originally said that the nav li section had a width of itself. Well, for me to be able to do that, I need to play with the width of the nav, not the li. So what this does for me is it makes these that now start to look like buttons. And let's make them look a little bit more like buttons for the end user. So in my mobile nav li, I want to display these as block elements. This is what's going to allow me to resize them. Otherwise, it's going to force it to be a just the size of what they are. Well, what I want to do is I want to set a height for them, 50 pixels. That way when somebody comes into my site and they click on it, now they get these links that are in a button that they aren't really tight together. It gives a little bit of extra room, and somebody can easily click on one of those. Alright, so I can play with things like the margin top, margin bottom, and so forth, and we can make those centered. What I want to show to you is that our content, though, is still shoved all the way to the right. So we need to fix our content, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to say that our content, and what we want to do is we want to reset its margins. So I'm going to simply say that its margin is inherited, and so that way it inherits the margin from the browser window, and now we get something like this. So now what we will see is that we have the title, we have our links here, and then we have the text on the page, no graphic, and then that way we save room on the screen, and we also save data for the user. So what you will see is if I change the size of this up to 768 by 1024, it goes back to the original design. If I go back to 320, it makes this layout. If I go to 360, it just makes it a little bit wider. But if I get up above 481 or higher, it's automatically going to go back to the other layout instead. I want to start making it where I also take into account people that have in-between sizes. Like on this computer here, I only have it half the width of the screen. And if I go to 768, then you'll notice the stuff actually does wrap off the side of the page here, and I don't want that to happen. So in this case, I have a regular computer, but the window size is smaller. And what I want it to do is I want it to automatically move things around just based on the size of my screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play with my last one, my screen.css, and what I'm going to do with this one is kind of like we did with the cell phone. I want to put the nav section up above. So I'm going to say that my nav, its float is none. And once again, I'm going to let it inherit the width of the screen, so that way the nav goes the whole way across. Now that's not going to be my individual LI elements yet, but I'll show you here what I mean in just a minute. Because if I just do this, and I refresh the page, I get something like this, and this is going back to looking like our phone. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to make these in line like we've been doing before. So if it's wide enough to have the two columns, then let's just make two columns, put all the links down the left side. If it's not wide enough, let's put the links across the top in an inline fashion. Okay, so I'm going to take my nav section in any of the LIs, and I'm going to display those in line. And so now we get this. Alright, so I have a lot of links up here, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete a couple of these so that way you can see it a little bit better. But what I want to do is typically on a real website, you only want to have a couple of links up there. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete these. That way you can see what happens. There we go. So now they're in line. And the intention here now is that if I go to a small screen, it puts those all at the top. If I go to a medium-sized screen, then they will go across. But what I want to do is I want to make it where if the screen size is bigger than this, then we're going to allow it to do something else. Alright, so I'm going to look at, say, like a 1280, no, 768. And what I want to do is I want to bring this stuff back. So what we're going to do is we're going to start playing with the different sizes. And to do that is going to be listed up here in my style sheet calls. Alright, so in my example here, I want all to be everybody. I have screen, which is the screen. And then I have print, which is when we print it out. And the mobile is going to be a small screen size. Well, what I want to do is I'm going to leave it where all is everybody, but screen is going to be only the screen, and only if it's between 481 pixels and 1024 pixels. So I'm going to say and then min width this time, so 481 pixels, so it has to be bigger than the mobile phone for this to work, and max width is going to be 1024 pixels. So now the intention here is going to be that if it's a screen and the screen is at least 481 pixels but smaller than 1024, actually we're going to make this 1023 because I want to make it if they have 1024 or wider then they get the full size, then this will be shown here. Okay, so at 768 we get this layout. If we go up to 1280 then we get this layout, so we get our 2-column view back. So what we're doing is we're just simply rearranging based on the size of the screen. Alright, now if you notice I have a smaller screen here and I have this margin set on the left here, so I want to override that. That was defined in all for our content section was margin left. Well, what I want to do is I want to set my content back such that the margin is inherited. And there we go. So now I have a screen that's 980 pixels wide. The links are at the top. If I go down to a phone size, they're all at the top. The picture is gone. Now they're displayed block, one on top of each other. And if I go above 1024, we get our 2-column view. Alright, so let's look at this just in a regular browser window, because you can actually see this with any browser. I'm going to take my window and drag it smaller and watch what happens. As soon as I get down to less than 480 pixels, so right here, it goes down to that view. And no matter how small I get, it'll stay that type of view. When I get above 480, I get this format where the links go above the picture. And when I keep coming over, when I get above 1024, now I get the 2-column layout. And all I'm doing is just simply dragging my screen or my window, and just simply the width of the screen dictates the layout that we actually get.